Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Tucker with Console Room, and I want to welcome everyone to our WHOlloween event. We have a couple of different panels today, but to start things off, we are going to have some discussion and a few readings by local author Kathryn Sullivan. I've known Kathy for, oh my goodness, a couple decades now, I think. And she's been very heavily involved with the Doctor Who community in Minnesota and Wisconsin-ish areas. So I'm gonna now let Kathy introduce herself. Hi, Kathy.
Hello. Thanks, Jason. I write young adult fantasy and science fiction. I write Doctor Who related stuff back in the days of fan stories. So fanzines, missing pieces, the cat who walked through time. But these are basically fanzines of long ago. And I did get asked to write a short story for Short Trips, Big Finish Short Trips, with the Sixth Doctor and Evelyn, and a Bernice Summerfield short story. Unfortunately, those things are now out of print, but I know my own stuff.
Sure. You've when did you start writing? Did you start writing Doctor Who, or did you start writing other fantasy science fiction
I
first?
was 14 at the time. Doctor Who didn't get over to our shores until late after that. Well, except for the Peter Cushing movies. So I was reading all my dad's science fiction and fantasy and deciding at one point when I was 14, I can do this, and started writing. I was doing, because the science fiction of the time period I was reading, there were very few women characters, very few girls doing things. So of course I started having girls being the interstellar agents and being wizards, because I got a little tired of always all the wizards were always men. It's like, excuse me. What?
Nice. Do you still have did any of those stories see publication?
Some of them did. I've got some. Well, the first book I wrote when I was 14, which took many rewrites and many years to be published, was The Crystal Throne.
Oh, okay. All right.
And some of the short stories I was writing around that time, they were published in my short story collection and the new version of the short story collections, Agents, Adepts, and Apprentices. So some of these stories are dating from 1981. And
Oh,
I'm
goodness.
starting to get a few things like, so yeah, some of the things at that point, I probably could have updated a little bit more, but did update some with the new publication.
Oh, great. Well, you're going to do a couple of readings for us today. I think you're going to start out with a Halloween story that was published in the Winona newspaper.
Yes. They contacted me and said they already knew me because back in the 80s, I also did book review column and movie reviews and things like that. So they asked me, and they knew I was an author, so they figured, we have this whole series of spooky stories. Could you write us a spooky story? It's like, yeah, okay. And I noticed, well, you'll get the feeling from the story as to what I was noticing around town. And I decided
Okay.
to riff off that.
All right. Well, great. Why don't we go ahead and have you do the reading of that story? And I'm going to go on mute, turn off my camera while you're reading, and then when you're done, we'll discuss a few more things and before your next reading.
Okay, sounds good. And this is called The Halloween Protector, and Larry has kindly put a link to it, so you can always go back and read later on. I'm sure Jason will mention that again later. Halloween Protector. I wouldn't do that. Dave paused in the act of reaching for the carved pumpkin. He looked cautiously about him. The voice had seemed to come from nearby, but he didn't see anyone in the dark shadows surrounding the front steps. He backed a step from the pumpkin and risked a look up and down the street. Now it was after 9 p.m., and many of the trick-or-treaters had gone home. Most of the outside lights had gone dark. The only sound he could hear was the fallen leaves swirling down the sidewalk. He couldn't see anyone. He turned back to the pumpkin and was surprised to see that now there were two. The happy, smiling one he had reached for earlier, and a smaller one right beside it with a decidedly angry look to its carved eyes and fang-filled mouth. "You weren't there before," he muttered, and a dog began barking from inside the house. Alarmed, he turned and ran away, leaving the jack-o'-lanterns untouched. He slowed to a walk when he reached the intersection and turned the corner, glancing back the way he'd come. No lights had come on inside the house, and the dog had stopped barking. But he still felt as if someone was watching him. Dave caught up with his friend Josh on Lafayette Street. "How many did you get?" Josh greeted him. "I got 2, plus the one we missed last week." Dave glanced behind him. There was someone watching me at one house. "Hey, they're only Halloween decorations, and Halloween is over now." Dave glanced at his watch. It's not midnight yet. He remembered reading somewhere that jack-o'-lanterns were supposed to scare away evil spirits. He frowned. Not that a vegetable could be any good at that. Josh looked at him. "What's the time got to do with that? Trick-or-treating is over, so Halloween is over. We're just helping people clean up the decorations." He rubbed his hands together. "So let's find some pumpkins to smash." They stayed on the dimmer-lit streets. They hadn't gone much further before Josh elbowed him and pointed to a house with 2 pumpkins. They walked quietly up to the front steps. There were no lights on at all, even on the second floor of the house. Dave checked his watch. It was almost midnight, so they might all be asleep. Josh reached for the larger of the 2 pumpkins. "I wouldn't do that." Dave froze. It was the same voice as before. He put his hand on Josh's arm. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Josh pushed his hand away and reached again for the pumpkin. "You'll be sorry," the voice said. It was a nasty giggle. Dave looked behind him and then back at the steps. He gasped. There were now 3 pumpkins. The third one was the same small, angry pumpkin with fangs he had seen several streets back. "Josh, where did that come from?" He pointed. Josh looked at him, then back at the pumpkins. "Oh, sweet. It must have been hidden behind the others. That's a good one to start with." He picked up the pumpkin. The pumpkin's eyes blazed red. The fang-lined mouth opened wide. "You're mine!" Josh screamed. His body dissolved into red smoke, which streamed into the fanged mouth. The mouth closed, and the pumpkin plopped gently onto the grass. The red eyes glared at Dave. Lights came on in the surrounding houses. Dave backed up, looking around wildly. Josh was gone. The pumpkin giggled. Dave turned and ran, seeing in every shadow glowing carved eyes. The end. Warned you'd be short.
That was very good, very creepy. That it just it reminds me so much of the stories that we all kind of read as kids. Goosebumps were a little after my time, but kind of that kind of feel to it and everything, that kind of vibe. Did you read much in the way of scary stories growing up?
Oh,
You
yeah.
said you read a lot of science fiction and stuff.
I read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, but I'm the 4th kid in a family of 5, so my brothers and sisters had a whole bunch of books all over the house, so I was reading everything.
Oh, cool. What were some of your favorites growing up?
Let's see. Started off with Mom reading the Oz books to myself and my younger sister, and I started reading books because she was reading too slowly because my younger sister kept falling asleep too soon. And those were the illustrated 1916 or so books.
Okay.
I was born around then, so I love that artwork. And then we had a lot of mythology and Celtic legends books, and I remember those very much. And of course, when I found my dad's science fiction collection, I had Edgar Rice Burroughs, Andre Norton, Heinlein. I was just reading all over the place.
And so those were kind of your inspirations when it came to writing?
James Smith, who wrote a few female characters, and Andre Norton, and Eric Frank Russell. He did a lot of humorous pieces. So those are the ones I kept thinking, I can do this.
Okay, great. And then you said that a lot of these stories eventually got developed into your book that you're going to read, I think the first chapter from today, The Crystal Throne.
Right.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea for it and how you developed it over the years?
Uh, well, I first started writing again. I was 14. I was writing stories, and my best friend in high school had a horse. And I started off writing the story of my friend Jeannie riding her horse into the woods, and then what happened from there on, which of course didn't go into reality by that point, but I had fun. And she liked it back then. I would basically be writing the chapters and then passing them around during English class when we weren't supposed to be doing things like that. English class sometimes is boring, uh, which is not fair to the English teachers. They were really good people. But no, and over the years, because when I first started writing, it was the story went in a completely different direction from the way it was when I first started writing. The time it ended up, it starts around Halloween. It didn't start off that way back then. So that's why I'm thinking the first chapter of this, because the kids are sent into the woods to write an essay about the haunted tree.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and jump into it if you're ready
Okay,
to
sure.
do this
So,
chapter? Unless you have anything else you'd like to say before you start reading?
can't think of anything. Oh well, something will come to me. Or if
Okay.
there's questions later on too, because I'm sure I didn't check chat.
Sounds good.
But
Yeah, I'll check the chat
yeah.
while you're doing the reading and
Okay.
prep.
So Crystal Throne, which also has a map, because of course back in those days I had to have maps, which doesn't show up. Anyhow, first chapter, the door. Down, girl, steady. Jeannie Tucker clutched the reins and tried to keep her seat as the frightened Appaloosa reared wildly. The skittish mare came down on all fours and backed up a step, her eyes showing white and rolling at the leaves swirling on a gust of wind. Jeannie clung to the horse with knees and hands, using all the tricks her brother had taught her to bring the Appaloosa under control. The horse reared again. Down, Robin! Jeannie jerked the reins and managed to turn the big head as the mare tried to bolt off the trail into the dark tangle of trees. Robin tossed her head, fighting the bit, whinnying with fear. Finally, the mare quieted. Jeannie carefully released one hand from the reins to stroke the night-black neck. Easy, girl. Easy now. The horse stood quietly, calming under the continuous flow of talk and patting. Jeannie could feel the taut coil of fear loosen, the mare's body slowly relaxing beneath her. Silly. A bunch of dried-up old leaves, and you act as if a ghost is after you. Maybe you ought to write that essay on the haunted tree for me. You certainly get scared often enough. Robin swung her head back, nickering softly, and Jeannie suddenly felt tears of frustration springing to her eyes. Oh, why can't you behave, Robin? You know Mike's going to sell you if you keep this up. He almost sold you last time when I ended up in the hospital. But I promised that you would behave. You've got to, girl. She wiped her eyes on the rough sleeve of her brother's red wool jacket and shook her long brown hair back over one shoulder. We'd better get home, girl, before anything else happens. Despite her words, she sat still a while longer. The wood rustled softly about them, leaves painted the color of flames by the setting sun. Why did I feel I had to come to Wilson's Forest today, she thought, especially this time of the afternoon. She shook her head and nudged the mare into a walk. I certainly wasn't thinking straight, or else I wouldn't have brought Robin here. Starbolt or Firebird would have ignored the shadows and leaves, but not my poor Robin. The Appaloosa shivered, nickering uneasily. Jeannie patted the smooth neck. I know, honey. It's dark and spooky out here. That does it, she decided. Feelings or no feelings, I'm getting Robin home. She eyed the deepening shadows of the forest preserve, breathed in the dusty scent of autumn. The soft clops of Robin's hooves on the dirt trail and the creak of the saddle were loud in the stillness. She tensed and pulled the mare to a halt, hearing voices raised in anger above the rustling of the leaves. Jeannie glanced about nervously, recognizing the thick stand of trees. Oh, gosh, I'm practically right by the haunted tree. She shook herself. You're more of a chicken than Robin. Ghosts out in daylight? Angry ghosts? Listening to the irate mutter of the voices, she dismounted and pulled Robin onto a tiny path, almost hidden by thick bushes. The path was seldom used. People usually stayed away from the haunted tree. Jeannie shivered as she came within sight of the tree. Almost 13, and you still believe in Grandpa's story, she scolded herself. Trees don't walk. She shivered again. The tree did look haunted. The huge trunk of the ancient oak was bent and twisted with age and the heavy snows of past winters. The branches were bare of leaves, even in the summer, and the lower ones resembled twisted claws waiting to grab anyone who came too close. She saw the Burns twins arguing in the clearing before the tree and paused a moment in surprise. Peter and Jody were new to town. Their parents had moved in just before school started, but even newcomers would have been warned about the tree. Peter reached up and pulled down one of the dangling claw-like branches. Jeannie caught her breath and almost called out a warning, but Peter released the branch after a curious glance. It figures, she thought. Miss Long says to write something about the haunted tree, so Peter comes and studies it as if it was a specimen in biology class. She glanced at her watch. He skipped gymnastics practice to be here at this time. Why? Wonder what Jody's doing here. Jody appeared to be arguing with her twin. Peter ignored her, brushing his dusty hands on his jacket and jeans. Ugh. The fraternal twins were so different that the term twin didn't seem to apply to them. Peter was a little shorter than his sister, and his hair was sandy where hers was pale blonde. Their personalities differed also. Peter was more independent and often seemed older than his 12 years. Jody, on the other hand. Jeannie cut off that line of thought. Now that she was closer, she could feel the hot flames of anger between the two. How do I do that, she wondered, asking the same tired question. How is it that I always know what people are feeling? She turned away and began to lead Robin back to the main trail. Robin tossed her head and suddenly whinnied. I told you it was haunted, Jody screamed. Oh, bother, Jeannie muttered. She pulled Robin into the clearing and almost bumped into Peter. Hi, sorry to frighten you. You scared me, too. Didn't expect to see anybody out here. Jody glared at her with unfriendly blue eyes, and Jeannie felt the dark chill of the taller girl's hostility. Jody's glance flicked to Jeannie's oversized jacket and heavy jeans, and Jeannie suddenly felt very sloppy in comparison to Jody's fashionably bright colors and expensive jacket. But you can't ride a horse in that, she cheered herself. Hi, Jody. Did you have to ride an essay on the tree, too? Jody sniffed. Peter glanced over to his twin. Jody. I don't have to speak to farmers, Jody drawled arrogantly, especially to her. Amy Evans says she's weird. Amy says that... Oh, shut up, Jody, Peter interrupted. You sound like you're stuck in a loop. Jody glared at him. Go ahead, Peter said slowly, tightly controlled anger in his voice. Go ahead, add one more of Amy's comments. I dare you. Jody sniffed again. She strode haughtily past Jeannie, back to the trail. I'm telling Dad on you, she yelled and ran. I'm sorry, Jean, Peter sighed, drawing a hand through his rumpled sandy hair. Jody's been hanging around that Evans crowd too long. Jeannie shrugged. I've heard worse names from Amy. Peter suddenly looked past her and his blue eyes widened. Hey, Jean, is that an Appaloosa? The name is Jeannie, she said, adding the long E sound to the name. I like the genie of the lamp. At his blank expression, she mentally sighed and continued. Yes, she's an Appaloosa. The mare nudged Jeannie, and she automatically started stroking the silky neck. Do you ride? Don't I wish. We've always lived in cities or suburbs before now. Jeannie suddenly heard a voice saying, I could teach if you want. Her hand froze on Robin's neck. What had she said? She couldn't teach him, couldn't afford to be around him. What if she made some dumb slip that showed him exactly how different she was from others? No, safer not to teach him. And yet, Peter's smile grew even wider. Could you? That would be... Nah, he interrupted himself. I couldn't pay, and it would take up your time. I know you probably have chores. He sounded so dejected that she couldn't let him down. Maybe I can trust him. It'd be nice to have a friend my own age, not just a stable gang. Sure, she corrected herself cynically, as long as he thinks you're normal. But if he notices you're much too perceptive, then watch him draw away, just like all the rest. But somehow, the words slipped out without any thought. I never said anything about money. What do you think I am? We're friends, aren't we? And one of my chores is exercising some of my brother Mike's horses. So you'd be helping me. Robin nickered uneasily, and Jeannie led the mare over to the cleared area in front of the haunted tree, away from rustling leaves. Peter followed. Your brother has horses? My oldest brother raises horses. He bought Robin here in the spring. She's beautiful. Peter moved toward them, and Robin tried to hide behind Jeannie. He stopped and waited for the horse to quiet. Did I do something wrong? Jeannie held the bridle firmly. No, Robin just frightens very easily. Move slowly. I won't teach you on her. She's bad enough for me. Peter patted the sleek hide. Why do you ride her then? Mike told me if I could cure her, she's mine. He must not might have much confidence in you. Aren't horses expensive? Jeannie smiled. Oh, he does. He just thinks I've met my match in Robin. You see, Robin's previous owners are very cruel to her. She still doesn't trust people. Peter eyed her curiously. You know, you're a lot like your horse. I don't know why Amy's been picking on you, but with her around, I can see why you're always on your guard. Jeannie felt a slight shock at the unexpected remark. I'm not. You are. I've watched you in class. You're awful edgy around people. You hiding some deep, dark secret? Why do you let Amy push you around? I don't. She looked down at the ground, confused and unaccustomed to the kindness behind his remarks. Don't mess with Amy's crowd, Peter. I can handle her better than you can. We've been enemies for a long time. You're a newcomer. Amy couldn't do anything to bother me. Amy's already bothering you through Jody. And you don't know what one rumor in this town can do. Like the one she told Jody? Peter asked. That you have magical powers? Jeannie flushed in anger. That rumor was too close to the truth for comfort. I don't. Of course not. There's no such thing as magic, or haunted trees for that matter. Hey, I was meaning to ask you, how come when Miss Long mentioned this old tree, practically every kid in class looked scared? What's the big deal about it? It's just a tree. Jeannie glanced nervously at it and found herself wondering if it had heard. Miss Long is new to town. She doesn't understand yet, she said swiftly. She turned back to Peter. There are stories. Such as? Such as people vanishing. Peter frowned. Oh, come on. What does that prove? Not much, I guess. It did happen almost 100 years ago. But sometimes you can hear voices here. Only they don't sound human. Jeannie warmed to her subject, feeling as if she was reciting from one of the fantasies she loved to read. And there've been lights, dancing, bobbing lights like will-o'-the-wisp, only there's no swamp near here. The tree has been known to walk, too. Walk? Sure, Raccoon Creek is about 100 feet through there, she said, pointing through the thickly tangled underbrush. And the tree used to be on its banks. Huh? Yep. Stood right on the bank of a creek, 100 feet from here, until the bank was undercut so badly by the water that the tree was just about ready to fall in. This was back when Wilson's forest was private property, before the Wilsons donated to the town as a forest preserve. Anyhow, the Wilsons decided to cut the tree down. She paused for effect. And when they got up to the creek, the tree was gone. They finally found it right here. Peter silently studied the gnarled old tree. You're kidding, he said finally. You actually believe that stuff? Some. My grandfather remembers when the tree was on Raccoon Creek. He was my age then. Trees don't walk, Peter said flatly. Your grandfather's only kidding you. No, I can tell when someone is lying. And I also believe him because every time I come here, near the tree like this, I get the feeling there's someone watching me. She shivered, like right now. It's probably just Jody sneaking around. Peter glared into the shadows, looking for his twin. She's just as confused and hurt as you are, Peter. Give her time. He glanced at her sharply, and she realized her slip. I mean, she faltered, cursing her stupidity. It's always rough when my brothers and I fight. Must be worse for twins. Peter frowned at the surrounding trees. Yeah, it is. She won't even listen to me now. Jeannie forced herself to remain silent, although she wished she could say something to comfort him. She felt fear rising strongly in the mare's trembling body. Gosh, it's late. I've got to get Robin back. She swung up into the saddle and looked down at Peter, remembering her promise. Could you come out to the farm tomorrow? It's Saturday. I'd have time to start you then. That soon? Gee, that would be... The Appaloosa suddenly squealed with fear and reared. Jeannie, caught off guard, lost her balance and tumbled off Robin's back. Time seemed to slow as she fell. She heard Jody's laugh, saw the swing of dark cloth. Where's the tree? Oh my gosh, I'm going to hit... Suddenly she felt herself caught and cradled as if in two great arms, then dumped into a pile of leaves. A bell chimed in the distance as the two huge branches moved away from her to hang from the haunted tree again. She stared at the tree now in front of her, knowing it had been behind her only seconds ago. No, I'm dreaming. Trees don't do this. They don't. The trunk of the tree seemed to ripple like water, and Peter fell out of the brownness, catching his balance with the gymnast's reflexes. He turned and stared down at her, his eyes glassy, as a chime sounded in the stillness. Peter? You fell through the tree, he stammered. I tried to catch you, but you hit it and fell through. Then the tree grabbed me, and Jeannie heard her voice saying calmly, "And now we're here." Peter gulped, his face regaining some of its tan. "But where's here? Look, the forest is gone." And that's the end of chapter 1.
That was great. I've read it. It's been a long time since I read it. I think
You probably wrote the previous edition too.
Yeah, it was definitely the version that had the mountain for the cover. Yeah, I remember. I think I probably. What's that?
The chapters are longer too. The new publisher decided to chop it up a little bit sooner.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty sure I bought it from you at a convention at some point. At whether it was a local, it wasn't Console Room. I know that because I got it before Console Room was even an idea.
Yeah.
So it might have been Gallifrey or Chicago TARDIS or something. I don't know. Someplace where you had a table.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have attended a lot of conventions. Do you have any good convention memories that you'd like to share?
Lots of them. I mean, because for a while in Doctor Who fandom, I was attending a lot of the Doctor Who conventions, and I was working enough as a volunteer that I got to be guest escort for a couple of, like, Sylvester, Peter Davison, and some of the people from Robin Sherwood. I was helping out a lot of conventions. And that was before I had my books published, because at that point then I started, I have to basically do more of a pro rather than volunteering all the time.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So as a fan, probably Scorpio, because I managed to get a breakfast with Terry Nation, and I wanted to talk to him about writing in general.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Fantastic.
Where was that?
That was in the Chicago suburbs. Scorpio conventions are always around 4th of July weekend back at that time.
Okay.
They started off with Blake Seven, and as one of the creators of Blake Seven, he was one of the guests there. Everybody else was bidding on Paul Darrow's belt. And I just managed to get a low bid in for Terry Nation's with a breakfast with him. Yes.
Nice. For those who may not know, Terry Nation was the writer who pretty much he's kind of known as the creator of the Daleks. I mean, there were definitely other inputs as well, but they're his estate's property pretty much.
Uh-huh.
So we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
What do you love most about writing young adult fiction versus writing for a different age group?
Now I'm going to be discussing this in a panel Real Fantasy later on today too, because one of the things I like about writing more the younger age, you still have that sense of wonder. Things are still new, and you're not getting cynical about the world. It's still something. When you see an alien, it's not automatically a monster. You could actually befriend them. Whereas you've got an awful lot of baggage when you're writing an adult. And YA tends to go, I used to like writing about high school, and then I started remembering how much I didn't like living through high school.
Yeah.
Why I don't go to my high school reunions. Oh yeah, the only people who ever show up are the jocks and the cheerleaders. Like, yeah. Didn't miss those days. But with more middle grade and the younger YA, people are willing to work together more. You've got a lot more friendships. And YA middle grade usually focuses more on family and friends. And when you start getting to the YA, then you start working on how to fix society. You have a lot. And unfortunately, the trend in YA for the longest time was doing more dystopias and apocalyptic, and like, no, I'm sorry, I lived through the Cold War things. Like,
yeah, that does seem to be a trend these days. Everyone's trying to get the next Hunger Games in, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned something about that you're going to be doing another panel later. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, this is for World Fantasy because World Fantasy also going on this weekend.
Oh.
Yeah, virtual World Fantasy.
Okay. So the virtual the World Fantasy Convention, I'm guessing that's kind of like the World Sci-Fi Convention.
Yeah.
But with more of a focus on fantasy.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the Hugo Award is for science fiction. What is there an award for
World Fantasy Award?
Just the World Fantasy Award?
Yeah.
Okay.
It used to be a bust of Lovecraft, and now they finally changed it to more of a haunted tree.
Interesting. No, I did not know that was going on. I'll have to see, what is it open for people to attend panels?
No, unfortunately, you basically had to buy the whole full membership. It's like,
okay. Well, that's too bad.
Which was not.
Otherwise, I would say, hey, let's all go and watch Kathy later. But
yeah.
No. What is the panel? What is the panel you're going to be doing?
What's new in children's fantasy? But talking to some of the other, and I'm moderating that one. So Jessica Day George is going to be on there too. She writes a lot of good middle grade and young adult fantasy. So it's sounding more like we're going to be kind of changing from children to middle grade.
Okay.
Because one of the questions that they were going to have us ask was, not the wrong sheet of paper, was, my sheet of paper. I am organized here some days. Yeah, well, their questions, as you could tell, that their first question was, do the trends in children's fiction follow adult fiction? It's like, no, they follow YA fiction. Or does the age of readership define the direction the genre goes? And then what new trends do we see developing in children's fantasy? And I think the panelists are all going to go middle grade. We're not talking about children's. Because if you're talking children's, you're talking more talking animals, and characters are usually animals. And we're finally getting some diversity in kids and middle grade.
Well, great. Yeah, I've read. I've been a lifelong reader and always a particular connection to science fiction and fantasy, the Oz books, the Narnia, the Chronicles of Narnia, things like that growing up. And, I can definitely see those informing your work in, the whole finding a gateway, going to a magical realm, that kind of thing. And, that hook at the end of the new first chapter definitely makes me want to go back and revisit the work after all this time.
That's in the middle of the old first chapter, because back when I first wrote it, I was really, as a 14-year-old, I was really resentful of the fact that the age group I was reading, people kept thinking we had small attention spans, so they kept breaking everything up. I wanted longer chapters because I just finished Lord of the Rings. I'm going, yeah, I can handle it. So what happens? The new publisher decided, no, let's chop these up because middle grade reads shorter. Okay, fine. Well, I had it 10 years the old way. We'll try it the new way.
Have you gotten any feedback on
it? No.
Okay. Well, we have another question. National Novel Writing Month begins tomorrow. Do you participate in any way? And if so, what are the best benefits of the challenge in your opinion?
I don't usually participate because usually there's a lot of conventions going on. So
sure.
I hadn't even tried this year. I probably should try because there's a book I've been trying to get finished and I keep getting stalled on it. But since there's virtual cons going on too, it's like, okay, no, won't worry about that. Sure. And usually this is the season when the leaves are falling off the trees and you gotta get the yard work ready for the winter. So it's like,
well, do you have any advice for people who maybe are going to participate in the event?
My public library normally has a NaNoWriMo. I don't know what they're doing this year, but previous years they always had a NaNoWriMo con to get people started, because some people usually likes to write together in groups, and they've got groups encouraging each other. The lacrosse, which is about a half-hour drive from me, has a group that basically encourages each other to write. Um, uh, the most of the things I've heard is basically set yourself a goal of how many words to write each day, and that's basically what NaNoWriMo basically does. You've got, but I haven't followed it, so
Yeah, I think it's 50,000
yeah.
words during the month of November.
And Amber is saying it's virtual groups on Discord this year. Okay, well that's good.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We have a comment from someone on Facebook who is watching now. Love it. That's great. We have from Larry on YouTube. Stephen Moffat has often said that part of his goal when he was showrunner for Doctor Who was to scare kids. In fact, a lot of his storylines tended to focus on this sort of theme. How do you see this theme as relating to Doctor Who, and which episode of all of Doctor Who would you consider to have accomplished this most effectively? So, what's the scariest episode of Doctor Who? That I'm boiling that down. I think that's right.
Because Moffat basically, because he has young sons, would see what was scaring them and put them into an episode of Doctor Who. So you had the crack in the wall, you had the angels, the weeping angels coming up, and people would say Blink. I would go with Night Terrors, because now Blink I saw at a convention, and with the whole entire room reacting, yeah, it was scary. But I also saw Night Terrors at Dragon Con with a whole room full of people, and the way everybody was reacting, because like, yeah, okay, the angels can zap you, but those dolls turned you into one. So that was just
I mean, the child, the empty child, that was the same kind of concept, and that was a Stephen Moffat story. Yeah Interesting.
Yeah, so he's really good because he's got kids he can basically bounce ideas off of. Like,
Sure. It's so long ago that his kids, I'm sure, are grown now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Did you ever meet Stephen Moffat at one of the conventions? I know he's been to Galley a few times.
Yeah, back before he became showrunner.
Yeah, back when he was just a writer.
Yeah.
I mean, he had still done quite a bit of television at that point, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Doctor Who, since Console Room is a Doctor Who convention.
I'm a Doctor Who fan, so
yeah. Let's talk about how you became a Doctor Who fan.
Oh dear, I go into. If people don't want to be bored, I did go into great lengths in Chicks Dig Time Lords in my chapter there, because I became a Doctor Who fan without realizing it first, because I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. And around 68, 69, I'd run home from school every day, and Chicago was starting up their first UHF channel. And every day for a week, they were running Doctor Who and the Daleks. And I'd come home every day to watch that show. And I just
and when you say Doctor Who and the Daleks, you're talking about the William Hartnell?
The Peter Cushing.
Oh, the Peter Cushing movie.
Yes.
Were they every day for a week? They would rerun the same.
Okay. Well, that was just starting off. So they the adult shows, they would run something else, but they were testing the channel. That was new.
Sounds a little bit like a UHF station that we had here in the Twin Cities that at one point they had a little show just local in the Twin Cities market that they showed old cheesy B science fiction movies, and as a special thing they had a couple of people making jokes while they were doing it. I don't know if you've heard of this show. I don't know if it went on very well or took off or anything, but yeah. But so they were showing the movie.
Then
go ahead.
Later on, unfortunately, I was in college when they were actually running Doctor Who in the Chicago suburbs. I was already in DeKalb. You couldn't even get any television stations out there unless you were one of the tall dorms in the corner.
Oh gosh,
really bad. So Doctor Who fandom was starting up. And I was writing fanzine stories at that time, basically my original stuff. And one of the editors of the zine wanted me to write a Doctor Who. And I'm like, Doctor Who? So she convinced me to go to Media West, which was the first convention for fanzines. That's all they had. And I stopped at her house along the way, and she showed me Brain of Morbius.
Okay.
Great show to show me, because you had a matriarchal society, you had psi powers, which I was fascinated about and writing psi powers all the time. You had Sarah Jane rescuing the Doctor. I liked that show.
Nice. Nice.
And then I had to go hunt because they weren't showing Doctor Who here for years. Found out later they had been showing on Channel 5 during the day when I was already at work.
So you mentioned that you have a couple of Doctor Who stories in some fanzines.
Mm-hmm.
You said one of them is about Bernice Summerfield.
Yeah, that was not in the fanzine. That one Gary Russell asked me to write, and
okay.
The Dead Men Diaries. Paul Cornell basically was the editor, but Big Finish was starting off because they didn't have the license right for Doctor Who yet, but they had it for Bernice. So I wrote a story about our 24th century archaeologists.
Nice.
Discovering ruins on an ancient planet.
Nice. Yeah, I love Bernice. She is one of my favorite companions, and totally counts in my book as a 100% legitimate companion.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I can say, listening to you talk about how you wanted stories with girls and women as the protagonist, I can definitely see where you would be drawn to Bernice.
Yeah. I basically was focusing more on the archaeology side because everybody else was doing something else. It's like, no, she's a talented archaeologist. We should be. No. And then later on, Gary asked me to write a short story in one of the short trips. I'm blanking on the title. Started with an R. Reparation, I think. So I did the Sixth Doctor and Evelyn story for that one.
Okay. And you have a little bit of history with the character of Evelyn, don't you?
As do a lot of people from the Twin Cities, because it was at was it Convergence?
I think it was the first Convergence.
Yeah. They invited Gary Russell, and he had already been thinking about having the Sixth Doctor have a different companion. So we were all gathered by the pool as he was coming out with these ideas. Gary didn't bring his laptop with him. I had my laptop, so he was basically putting together his characteristics for Evelyn. It's like chocolate fan, whereas Sean Line was going, she needs to be an older woman, and we had ideas thrown out all over the place. She was wearing a cardigan, she liked cats, and Gary had always been wanting to have an older companion for that Doctor, and she's such a great character, and
yeah,
we no longer have Maggie with us. But
yeah, I did get a chance to meet Maggie Stables a few times at Gallifrey.
Yeah.
So she was a sweetheart.
Yeah.
She really brought that character to life.
Yeah, she really brought that character to life, and that character toned down the Sixth Doctor so well. I mean, the Sixth Doctor is really great in the audios now.
Yeah, yeah. So you have a couple of fanzines there with you. What are the stories that you have in those?
Let's see. Some of these are charity anthologies a long time ago. I do have one where I wrote about the Fourth Doctor and Leela discovering Zygons on one planet, and that's over on my table over there. Perfect Timing. I had a short story in it with the Second Doctor. Let's see. What's the Second Doctor, wasn't? Yeah, Thick of the Thieves, where I had the Second Doctor, Zoe and Jamie, and the TARDIS lands in an intergalactic library. Of course.
Of course.
Yes, one must do that.
Did we mention that you are a librarian?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
Retired librarian now.
Yeah.
But that's the other funny thing. I decided to go into librarianship because I was already writing, and I figured if I become a librarian, I can at least guarantee my book will be in one library.
There we go. So that was Perfect Timing. What's the other one?
Perfect Timing, Missing Pieces, Sean Lyon did. I did one with Evelyn Smythe and the Sixth Doctor on an alien planet, and Evelyn basically gives a pep talk to a would-be queen.
Okay. So would either of those, we have about 15 minutes. Could you read at least part of either one of the, I mean, I suppose people can't run out and find them
Yeah, they
if
can't
you
find
can't
those
finish
anymore. I did include part of the Perfect Timing story in Children of Time, which is a kind of a review anthology that R.L. Stlyter has put together, and we write about various companions. So it's the Children of Time, the companions of Doctor Who. So I have one essay about Evelyn Smythe and one essay about Zoe.
Yeah.
As usual, librarian.
What about your, you said you have something in Chickstick Time Lords. What is that you have in Chickstick Time Lords?
I was basically writing about fanzines of the time period back in the day, and my writing and how it all worked together with those two. So I was basically giving kind of like my history in Doctor Who fandom and covering some of the fanzines and conventions of the time.
Okay. And I think you also, there's a book about the companions that you have something in, correct?
Yeah. That's the Children of Time, the companions of Doctor Who, where I've got an essay about both Evelyn and Zoe.
Nice, nice. So if you had to pick a favorite companion?
Ooh. Classic, Zoe.
Okay.
Brain. Here we go. Audio, Evelyn.
Sure.
Kind of a toss-up with the new Who, because Donna is such a great character. I really hated how RTD ended her run.
Yeah.
Bill, though, is a really great character. And it's just, she just had a different way of looking at things, like comparing the inside of the TARDIS to a kitchen.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, there's so many companions I really like in different things.
Yeah, that's one of those tough questions where, you it's so hard to choose a favorite and everything.
Because I'm really good at dodging the doctor question, because I like all the doctors. Because they're all
yes.
They're all the doctor.
I know that Colin has come out before saying that he doesn't like those lists ranking the various doctors.
But he should be happy with the latest.
I know. I was just going to say, do you think he's happier about that one?
Yeah.
I wonder if him and Peter had any words about that. We've gotten a few likes. SD Who Con shared some love for the panel on Facebook.
Okay.
We also have a comment that Bill and Donna are Amber's favorites.
Yes.
So, what was I was gonna ask you something, and of course it's escaping me at the moment. Oh, what I was gonna say is, with these charity anthologies, I wonder if, since they are so very much out of print, and I don't know what kind of contracts they had for the people who participated, but I wonder if you'd be able to post your stories from them on your website. I mean, they're both, 20 years old now?
Yeah, but it's like, So in one case, I did take elements from one and rewrite it with different characters, and ended up in Adepts and Apprentices with different characters. If you know the background of that story, you can probably see what characters might have been the doctor and stuff. But
do you have anything short from Agents and Apprentices that you?
Oh, I got short stuff, but I don't know how much.
I mean, we have about 10 minutes left. 10 so minutes. Something that can that would take 3 or 4 minutes, and then we can wrap things up and say our goodbyes.
Sure, I've got. Let's see. Do you want to? my father's favorite short story back in the day, and then there's also another one I do like, but it's with my interstellar agents. So it's like, you want fantasy or do you want science fiction?
Well, we had two Well,
Yeah, we did
why don't we
do
go science
fantasy.
fiction?
Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of had two fantasy. One
Yeah.
was semi horror, but why don't we go science fiction this time?
Okay. So this one, let me get to it. It's getting more towards the back of the story. This one is called Communication Difficulties. The alien's thoughts were so noisy. Jenny just wished she could use his constant murmur to locate it exactly. Oh, that might come when she knew how to use her talent. Jenny scowled at the flock of flamingos milling before her. Contrary to what various television shows suggested, pulling a craft spaceship out of a marsh and trying to cover up any signs it had ever been there took time and hard work. That's probably why they never show that part, she thought. They just skipped to the Discovery turning and the ship gone. She pushed a sweat-draggled lock of red hair back out of her face. Tracking the former occupant of said spaceship through a mild swamp hadn't been much fun either. She glanced past the flock, noting the unbroken grasses beyond, and then returned her attention to the tall pink birds. Oh well, might as well try the easy way first. Anyone needing a ride? She shouted in Galactic, startling the nearer birds. The closer flamingos settled, but then wings flapped with flashes of crimson at the far edge of the flock as one of their number bounded straight up, head high. Me! It landed with a splash and hopped toward her. The flock scattered out of the alien's path. Me! Oh, thank the bright sky you came! The alien paused on his one long leg and looked back at the regrouping flock. Jenny bemusedly studied the bright pink feathers atop a long-necked head and spiky pink-furred body. Snobs, it said. They won't even talk to me. The flock's honks reminded Jenny of geese. She shook her head at the thought of how the conversations might have gone. Maybe you weren't speaking their language. Nonsense. Everyone speaks Galactic. The alien lowered its head to peer at her from under its fluffy fringe. You're speaking Galactic. It straightened and looked back at the flock. Next you'll say they aren't sapient. Anyone can see how intelligent they are. The flock waded slowly through the lagoon, their heads turning back and forth in synchronized display. Snobs, the alien repeated. It paused. Though, perhaps they were respecting my confidence. I did tell them I was here undercover. Undercover? Jenny looked again at the images in the alien's relatively unshielded mind. You didn't crash? Telepathy was still new to her. Maybe she was interpreting the situation wrong, and the alien had a valid reason to be on a closed world? Did I miss a memo? The alien bounced slowly in place. Well, yes, I did. But only because I was so excited to see the avians of this planet. There were so many, and they fly. I lost control and crashed. But actually, I'm here to communicate with other avians and tell them of their kin among the stars. It raised its voice, addressing the flock. You do not need to live in fear of the reptile oppressors. I have come to set you free. Jenny mentally sighed, and here I thought Jan was kidding when she told me about the amphibian freedom fighter. She had heard enough. Time to leave before any of several government agencies caught up. And now that the alien was speaking Galactic, she could pick out words among its sought images. Foremost among them was how to convince this featherless biped to help it retrieve its ship and find another group of friendlier avians before the dreaded Bureau of Closed Planets turned up. The resident agent of the dreaded Bureau shook her head. Not your day, Jenny said aloud. She remembered the sign she'd passed earlier advertising Captain Bill's Gator Wrestling. But you know, it might have been a lot worse. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. How many stories are in that collection?
22.
22. Okay.
Some of them are really short, some of them are connected, some of them are disconnected, completely separate.
Okay. And what kind of time frame did you write those in? Like how old is the oldest one and how new is the newest one?
The oldest one I think is probably about 1980 or so. Let's see, I'd have to go back to my website. And the newest one came from an anthology 2015, I think. So some of them are really new and some of them are really old, but
Okay.
updated a little bit.
Oh, great. Are you currently working on anything?
That's another reason why I should really try to do something with NaNoWriMo this year. I'm working on a middle grade story where the girl, they're settled on an alien planet and she wants to be an explorer like her grandmother who found this planet.
Okay. Cool. Very cool. Do you has there what has been keeping you occupied um, during the um, during the last
In
few
the
months?
downtime,
Yes.
uh, let's see, yard work. Um,
Have
I
you
was
been
asked,
reading or seeing anything good?
I did get the DVD of the 2 seasons of Discovery, so it's like, okay, I can see what people are going on about, but I don't do streaming, so it's like,
Mm,
I wait for the DVDs to come out.
sure.
I was asked at the beginning of the downtime to write a short story because RavenCon was wanting to do a collection of short stories to benefit their dealers, and they wanted more Raven related. Well, I've got this, the sequel to the Crystal Throne is Talking to Trees, where I've got a wizard who has a blue jay for a familiar. And blue jays are related to crows, so they had that intelligence. So I was like, okay, I can do a short story with my wizard and her crow and her blue jay driving somebody else nuts.
That was for RavenCon, you said?
Yeah, RavenCon, but they were supposed to announce that this anthology is going to be for sale. I haven't heard a word, so I don't know what happened to that.
Okay. Where is RavenCon? What kind of
RavenCon is in Virginia.
Okay. And what kind of convention are they?
Science fiction. Yeah,
Science fiction.
science fiction, because they were going to be doing kind of at the anniversary of the 2010 convention where Terry Brooks, I think it was Terry Brooks and myself were there, so they were inviting all the guests back again.
Oh, okay.
And then
Yeah. How many conventions would you say you attend a year, Kathy?
Now that I'm retired and have books to promote, I usually go around 15, probably more if you add the Young Writers Conferences I usually present at.
Okay.
Back when working, I had a little more trouble trying to get around to that many.
I just always like, we're friends on Facebook, and there's always a post saying, here's my schedule at this convention this weekend, and all across the country, various places. You tend to focus mostly on Midwest and East Coast, I think.
Because it was easier, and that a lot of them know me. But then I started branching out because okay, well, it helps because the Dallas convention works out really good because my older sisters live down there, so I can visit them.
And it's just down the road.
Yeah, really. The convention was one time until they moved hotels, but it was just and of course Gallifrey. Got to go to Gallifrey every year.
Sure. Yeah. And I am very much looking forward to the day that we can all get together in person again. I didn't realize how much I miss just the ability to geek out with fellow fans about not just Doctor Who, but everything.
Yeah.
I finished the first book of the Wheel of Time, and I know Amber and Larry on our committee are both big fans, and it's like I could imagine us having a time in Consuite where we're just talking Wheel of Time or something.
Yeah.
But
because it's not the same typing it all out. I mean, sometimes we're making it easier.
It is, and I think that a lot of the conventions have been doing a really good job converting to virtual and stuff. Yeah. Some are a little chaotic, but
because I mean, NASFIC basically had the bar talk in Discord. World Fantasy right now is doing separate breakout rooms so they can have the parties that way. Which is
well, speaking of World Fantasy, you have that coming up. So, and we are at the hour. Do you have any last things that you would like to say, direct people to your website and such? I know you have it up on the
yeah, they've already got it. You've already got it up, so I don't really need to keep reading. Stay healthy, wear your masks. Happy Halloween.
And happy Halloween to you too, Kathy. All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you from Console Room.